Workshop to order, and we'll stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to thank everyone for making time in their afternoon to come for this workshop. A workshop like this allows the council the opportunity in the same room, get questions answered and asked together, which is, I think, is nice. And while we are public, we allow people in the audience to sit and listen. Today, we're not taking public comment, but we would appreciate hearing public comment if you have on today's meeting. I plan on bringing this back to discuss at Monday's council meeting. I would love to hear from the public questions, concerns, and comments prior to the 5:30 meeting on Monday. You can email them to us, you can mail them to the mayor and council, whatever is best for you. But please, I would encourage anyone who has a comment on today's meeting or a comment on the promenade to please let the council know. So today we're gonna, yes, Monday we're gonna discuss the public comments at Monday's meeting. One of the things I wanted to propose or ask the council is, I know we've heard comments about businesses and their input to this process. We did have a suggestion to hold a business stakeholder meeting. I think that I would ask Ross, I know Tracy Ward's name was offered as a moderator. If we would I'd love to hear from the businesses and give them that opportunity to have that next week if possible. Would that, Ross, give enough time to plan a meeting for businesses to hear what a potential, what we discuss here today? Will that give them enough time to react if we offer them opportunity next week?
I think so. I think it'll be important if we're having public comment between now and Monday. It'll be important for them to be able to hear that public comment, certainly. I'm sure many of them will have their own comment to supply between now and Monday. And so if we're pushing for something next week after Monday, I think that would be fine.
Okay. All right. So, and then, we can always hold another special meeting after that. And, after we hear from the public, we hear from the businesses. Gentlemen, do you have any comments regarding that or concerns regarding a timeline like that?
Well, I said before, and I say it again, I'm strongly in favor of us having this meeting to find out what the merchants in town really want and how they want us to respond to it. I just don't see how we can have an operational plan without hearing from everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think it's absolutely critical because if we do something in Washington Street, it's going to impact all the rest of the people. They need to have a say in it.
Okay. So you think plenty of time if we announce today to have a meeting? Are you comfortable with 1 week, having it next week?
I think we should have it as quick as we can do it.
Okay.
Proficiently.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you mind if I ask a question real quick
course.
with that? So Mr. Engel at the last meeting had referenced wanting to hear directly from businesses. If Tracy and I are moderating the meeting or running the meeting in a setting that it wouldn't be a public meeting, it technically wouldn't be it would be coming from us to report back. Are you thinking to actually have a public meeting where the businesses are invited to in a larger space so that all the council members can be there?
Yeah, I would certainly
Okay.
encourage that, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I would just like one individual moderating it. And I think Tracy's a good neutral individual at this point.
I think it's fair to have Ross there representing downtown.
He can present, but I'm just saying as a moderator, I want somebody who's not as directly vested.
Oh, I think it's fair to have both. I'd like to see Mr. Benacasa involved as moderator, involved in the running of the meeting at some level.
Well, as I say, I disagree with you, but that's fine. It's okay to disagree.
It's okay. And they can hash it out between the two. I'm sorry, Tracy. Now I see you kind of behind the podium. Are you okay with taking that on with Ross?
We can discuss it.
Okay. The only reason I say it is because it was a suggestion that was made and your name was.
I'm perfectly fine helping the town in any way that I can.
All right.
Or the EETC.
Thank you. All righty. this is an opportunity, like I said, for councilmen to hear from all the parties who have been involved so far. We have Ross, we have engineering, we have the police department here, with mayor. Thank you. So, I guess, Ross, do you want to start? And we'll see.
Do you mind if I take this off? Well, good afternoon, council. So really just to start off, I think since the last public meeting, we've certainly heard quite a few comments from the public via email. I know that the council has heard even more. And then of course, for better and worse, we've seen social media as well and what's come of it. So one thing that we did, so yesterday, 2 council members, Don Abatello and Mr. Silverstein, met with some of the stakeholders.
No, I did not meet with, oh, you're talking about yesterday's meeting, I apologize.
Yep. Met with some of the stakeholders here to discuss some of the possible changes that can be made or some possible revisions that can be made to help the businesses. There were really 3 plans that were talked about. One, which I believe it was Mr. Abatello that brought this up, was a weekend, so a Friday evening through Sunday closure, which would be a full closure of North Washington Street during that time frame. Barriers would be installed each Friday and removed each Monday morning, early morning, by the Public Works team. It would allow for a larger dining area for our restaurants to use. I think that one point that's been brought up throughout this process, but especially throughout the last week, has been the need for social distancing in light of the pandemic that we're seeing is actually increasing in numbers. And so this would allow for even a larger dining area for restaurants and allow them to spread out more. It would be able to focus on time when even the captain had mentioned traffic wouldn't be as large of a concern, still always a concern, but not as large of a concern as it would be for weekdays. It also, from our restaurants' perspective, it is their busiest time when we're focusing on weekends. It's a time when they can use additional seating and can fill that seating. We're not really concerned at that point, like we were with a 7-day closure, of having the optics issue of a Monday or Tuesday or a Wednesday where there's a restaurant that's closed or there might be some seats that aren't taken. It'll impact our courthouse and our banks pretty minimally if we're starting Friday evening and wrapping it up by early on Sunday morning. And certainly the courthouse is a major driver for traffic in the area and will continue to be so as they start to open up more and more and go back to normalcy. And so avoiding them and causing issues there as minimally as possible. It's also going to impact deliveries minimally and will allow our programming to be more focused. It does require setup and tear down each weekend, which we know there are significant potential overtime costs with that. And certainly those overtime costs may have minimal benefit if there's weather-related cancellations. So if we're doing a 3-day closure and it's a weekend that, we have a storm coming in or whatever it might be, certainly we're paying for a closure that we wouldn't really be able to fully utilize. It's still a plan that does, although I do believe it benefits the downtown as a whole in some ways, it does certainly focus in on the Washington Street businesses. The other plan that was brought up by Mr. Silverstein was closing off the parallel parking on northbound Washington Street. And please, Mr. Abatello and Silverstein, just jump in and correct me if I miss something here, but we just want to recap it. So this was a closure of the parallel parking on North Washington Street to allow for dining outside without impacting traffic flow on North Washington. This plan, and we are going to add in, I do think that it's a plan that has some merit in that it wouldn't shut down all the parking on Washington, and it would still allow, for the most part, for traffic to flow as it does now. We wouldn't see some of the concerns that we were seeing with the full closure. It's also easily expanded to other streets. Well, easier to expand to other streets. And so if we do see it being effective, not only in the short term, but also the long term. It is something that if our other restaurants are interested in this, we can certainly potentially look at bringing them on board because, again, it does not shut down the traffic on the street that it's being implemented on. We also think it's pretty easy to set up safely. So when we're doing an event and we have to close down a street or close down a portion of the street, understandably the police require fairly heavy barriers to do so. In this case, we're just talking about dining. And so we would certainly want some type of walls or barriers up to protect, but to be quite honest, it's not, from our standpoint, all that different from what you're seeing at Banning's or other restaurants now with sidewalk dining. I mean, you have people outside that are eating right next to the traffic that's moving by. If someone wanted to, unfortunately, jump the curb or do something like that, they certainly could in those scenarios now. We also believe that this is something that may have more permanence. So this is from our perspective as Discover Easton. There is a potential to build in what are called parklets. They're pretty common in a lot of small and larger cities around the country. Parklets look at more of a full-time dining experience in places of parallel parking in front of restaurants. They allow for expanded dining on a pretty minimal budget overall, and allow for a longer-term usage. And so I do have some examples of pictures of that could be considered with Public Works and Engineering's blessing that I'll be kind of happy to hand out after this. And then the third thing that was talked about.
Real quick, Ross, can
Sure.
I ask a question about the closing of the parallel parking? That would be 7 days a week, correct?
That is our recommendation. I do not know if that was a specific recommendation made yesterday. I don't know if there was a time frame attached to it when we discussed it yesterday, but our recommendation would be a 7-day. It would cut down on overtime costs certainly, but also because it's not impacting traffic flow. From our perspective, that would be the best case scenario.
Okay.
The third option that was floated was a northbound closure. Again, I don't know if a time frame was attached to this, which would only close one side of Washington Street. As a benefit to this would certainly allow our restaurants to use more space. One of our concerns with parallel parking dining, especially during the pandemic and the need for social distancing, is how much of an impact can it truly have on our restaurants when you do have to spread out. We would ask that in that case, our restaurants are actually allowed to go beyond their specific street frontage to utilize more parking because of the minimal effect it would have with distancing. So a northbound closure allows them to extend out almost to the degree that they would have with a full closure. It allows southbound traffic to continue to move through the area. And we do think a northbound closure can be executed pretty quickly. We do have some concerns with a northbound closure. One big one to a northbound closure is that, although I don't think a time frame was attached to it, if it's considered for just a weekend closure, we are looking at a pretty major setup and tear down of that process. Because you're talking about even more barriers at that point that would have to be put out on Friday and taken down Monday morning. We also think that for a northbound closure to be successful, and I do think it can be, but for it to be successful, we would need to refer to engineering or to the town to see if there's a way to maintain two-way traffic on Washington Street. And I know that there is a bump out right now at the corner of Federal and Washington, which really hurts that possibility, but we think that overall, certainly deferring to the experts on this, that removing the diagonal parking and allowing for two-way traffic to continue on Washington will create fewer issues. If we maintain the diagonal parking on Washington and only allow southbound through, there's really two choke points we would be concerned with. One would be Federal and Washington, which usually has a no left turn lane there. If we're allowing southbound traffic to go through, that no left-hand turn would have to pretty much continue because of the safety issues of people coming through, but then you're going to cause a bottleneck there at Federal and Washington. We also would have a concern, there's no left-hand turn signal at Dover and Washington, and if southbound traffic is coming through unimpeded, those people on Washington Street that are trying to get down Dover to West Street would run into an issue of having to wait for that traffic to pass every single time, and it would cause, we think, probably a buildup on South Washington Street at that traffic light. It is, as a benefit though, probably the quickest thing for us to implement. So if there is a consideration by the council that they want to implement something quickly, the northbound closure would be probably the quickest if we can refer to engineering about potentially having two-way traffic coming through. We have heard from, especially, we've talked to quite a few businesses through this process, even more over the past week or so. We've heard from businesses that were in full support of the original project, businesses that are in support of it with alterations, and businesses that have concerns, certainly. I think that it would be in poor taste to say that everyone's gung-ho about this. There are concerns. But I do think that we have also recognized that our businesses, and especially our restaurants, they're at a point where they need something. Our Washington Street restaurants, from talking to them this past weekend, certainly felt a bit defeated, I think, and are at a point where they are hoping that something, potentially as early as this weekend, but something in the near future will come.
Does anyone have any questions?
Megan, if you don't mind, I'd like to add
Yeah.
something just real quick,
Sure.
and I hope you can hear me.
I can.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I was discussing a few things yesterday evening with some folks, and one of the things that I'd like to possibly propose is almost a hybrid of two of those plans. In talking with concerns about the setup on Friday evening, and also with the possibility of doing the parallel parking. If we were to do the parallel and cost, if we were to do the parallel parking during the week, during the Monday through Friday, and then we were to close Washington Street Saturday morning through Sunday, the barriers would be right there. It would be easier for Public Works, because what they could do simply is on Friday, they could move those barriers from the parallel parking blocking to blocking the whole street. And then Monday morning, they can put them back to parallel parking blocking so that they would be there. They wouldn't have to be moved from the town barn. And the concern, of course, on Friday would be people, especially once court's back in session, if there are a lot of people parked in front of the courthouse, for whatever possible reason, there's going to be a delay in getting things set up Friday evening anyway. But if they have that parallel parking Monday through Friday, and then on the weekend close Washington Street Saturday and Sunday, that might be a possibility of a hybrid of those two plans.
Okay. I guess one of the issues with that would be, excuse me, the loss of parking on that east side then throughout the week then, right?
That's correct. But I mean, again, when we were talking about the parallel parking, we were talking about doing that
Yeah.
all the time. So that would still be that loss of spots right in front of the pub, SCOSA, and docks.
That's true. Oh, that's option number 2, correct. That was the 7 days parallel parking. Okay. Well, not a bad idea.
But under that idea, Washington Street wouldn't be shut down Friday evening just to the possible problems with that, and it would be shut down for Saturday and Sunday.
Okay. So Ross, I guess that's kind of a hybrid of
Mm-hmm.
a couple of your option number 1 and option number 2. Or scenario 1, scenario 2.
Sure, yeah, and I think, again, if it's something that the town thinks is feasible and safe, we could certainly, and we would, again, probably, we can certainly focus in the programming on Saturday and Sunday in that case. Yeah, I think that would certainly be doable,
Okay.
from our perspective, I mean, with that, yeah.
From our perspective, that doesn't work.
Okay.
Because now we're right back to Monday through Friday. You're diverting half of Washington Street onto secondary roads that aren't prepared for that.
I don't think, on Saturday and Sunday,
He's just saying the parallel parking.
just parallel parking.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
It
I
doesn't
got you.
affect
I got you.
traffic.
My mistake,
Yeah.
mistake. The weekends are better. I'll start there. The weekends are better. I still come with reservation and concern, and it will have to be evaluated very closely with the loads on Harrison and Dover or West Street. Ross's point about Federal Street entering Washington Street on the right turn only, I don't think that's going to be a problem because you still have Goldsboro Street traffic light functioning correctly, and that's going to create the breaks in traffic to allow people to enter the street as they do now. The police department, of those 3 events, now, you asked me yesterday about resources for the barricading the streets. And I said, for barricading the streets, yes, we could do that with a minimum amount of resources and overtime. But that's to barricade the streets. We are under the assumption that this is a outdoor dining, which under CDC regulations, people come, eat, then leave. I'm even hearing yesterday that there's entertainment being discussed to be out there. So if this turns into something other than outdoor dining, then we will have other costs that may be accrued to support whatever it is that's taking place. I know that there's a lot of misperception of what's out there in the community, what this is,
Yeah.
justified or not. That everything I'm hearing is not dining.
Say again?
Everything I'm hearing from a lot of people is this isn't just a outdoor dining. This is a grander thing. But moving forward, all of our plans, I just want you to know, we're just narrowed down on this being outdoor dining. So it's just a road closure that we're doing, and we are dealing with like I said yesterday, outside the barricade issues. We will support the parallel parking and these parklets that was discussed first on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Afterwards, if this is just northbound only closure, then obviously that's doesn't put as much strain on the secondary road, so we would support that secondly. And then thirdly, I guess a matter of default, then the street's closed. And if it's going to have to be closed, it could be more manageable on a weekend than 7 days a week. But with that comes a little asterisk that there's a lot of unknown variables and repercussions that could happen.
Sorry, Captain, if I am interrupting you. I agree with the Captain. As far as if there were to be any music or anything like that, just like with any other public assembly, I think, that would have to be sent to you guys for review before it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously if we were to approve it or not. So.
But I do think, just my opinion as far as those extras go, I think that's really where the benefit to all of downtown comes, is because once you increase that foot traffic downtown, that's where the other restaurants, maybe not the other restaurants, the other shops, ice cream shops, whatever it is, we'll see more foot traffic down there from that. If something is drawing people down to the town besides just dining, because maybe, I think while outdoor dining is preferred, I believe that's still the governor's recommendation, is outdoor dining is better than indoor dining. I'm sure that the people still aren't comfortable with that. But if there was something else to draw them downtown, and that draws those people and it increases that amount of foot traffic, that might be more of a benefit to all.
But there's a lot of people don't drive, they travel through downtown because of the layout of the roads. They don't necessarily drive to downtown for a destination. And that's what I'm speaking about, is the more load we're putting on these side streets, or the less load, the greater. So the parallel parklet is first preferred. Closing half down is a lot better than closing the whole thing down.
I can see Thompson Park. That's a great little park.
Yeah.
I can see doing something in Thompson Park, music there or something like that. We had a couple of individuals who played some music across the street by the courthouse. Talking to Dr. Frida Wadley from the Health Department, she sent me an email yesterday. We've increased from 111 to 187 people who've tested positive for COVID. They're experiencing 8 to 10 new cases every day. Queen Anne's County's positivity rate is 7.8 and ours is 7.7, and the state average is 4.46. And so that's why I have real concerns about trying to pack large crowds of people into the downtown area into any kind of a space. You can tell me you're gonna social distance people, but I've seen some recent events downtown, and people, have not social distanced. And so I still think we have some ways of doing that without closing streets. I'm not a fan of closing streets. The parklet idea, closing off, trying to help the restaurants that way, that's great. But I think one of the charms of our community is being able to drive past the courthouse and drive through. So, I just have great concerns. And, we're seeing Ocean City, restaurants are closing down there because of COVID. I talked with Johnny Mouts yesterday. He had an employee with COVID. He has closed C Street, Carpenter Street, and is going through a whole process of getting everybody tested. And part of the problem, as I understand it, is you have individuals who take their masks off and go outside and maybe have a smoke or do something else, and somebody else gets exposed. So I know the restaurants are doing the best job they can, and they're working with everybody, but the rate's rising again, so we got to make sure whatever we do, that we protect the public. And we have a lot of public that needs to be protected based on the age of our community. And so whatever we do, we've got to keep that in mind.
Wouldn't, just to play slight devil's advocate along those lines, wouldn't that be more of a push for the closure of Washington Street to allow actually that extra space to spread out? Ross, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, and I don't understand what I know we weren't sure exactly what the full plan is, but I'm not guessing that Mr. Benacasa is gonna be planning events down there 24/7, but if safety is an issue, maybe the full closure might be a bad idea, to allow those restaurants and allow people to spread out as opposed to containing them in a smaller street.
See, I don't see it that way. I see that the more open space you have, the more people you can draw down, and that they're not going to social distance. There was somebody on Facebook from an organization who was very upset because she said she was planning a half-day musical event next year in the Promenade. We talked about the Tidewater Inn doing something like they do on Harrison Street. I've gone for 20 years to Harrison Street, and it's crowded when they do music on Harrison Street. So once again, I just think that, my personal opinion, we got to be careful about this. I want to help the restaurants. If our stated goal is to help the restaurants, let's do that, and the other businesses downtown. Use Thompson Park. Use the street corners for musicians like we've done on Harrison Street across from the Tidewater. There's some things we can do there. But we've got a problem still. And, the other question is, how many dollars is it going to cost? And we still haven't gotten a quantitative figure on how many dollars. Are we better served to take those dollars, put a grant program together for the town, and make grants to some of these businesses that are being impacted? I don't know, but I'd like to see what the dollars look like before we spend a lot of money. And so I think the opportunity next week to get together, have that facilitated meeting, get people's ideas, come back and say, okay, what else have we got to do before we make some final decisions, is the way to go. So I feel very badly about my first vote. I should have asked for more information. I should have asked for other things, and I didn't feel as though that I did my homework good enough. And that's why we ended up reversing ourselves. So let's not put ourselves in a position where we have to come back again, and let's do it right this time. And we're doing it for the right reasons, so let's do it right.
And I agree with you on some of the things. I think that we have to remain fluid. I think that we are in unprecedented times. We're during a pandemic, and we don't really have the luxury of looking back to historical data. I think we've always mentioned that we wanted to remain fluid with things. We've always wanted to hear back from Ross to see how it is proceeding week to week. I still think we need to know that, but until we try something, I don't think we're really going to be able to start collecting any data. Until it's just a best guess from now until then. I think until we start trying something, we really just don't know, so, and I think, you know, pushing events, if you wanna call them events, or music, you know, the outdoor street concerts, I think utilizing all of downtown is wonderful. My kids and I, you know, on many occasions have gone to the street concerts, and yeah, the street's full with people. Whether we'll see those numbers now, I don't know, but it's nice to maybe, like you said, utilize Thompson Park, utilize some of the other streets potentially to spread that out, while in addition still having that dining experience, so they can spread out. There's nothing wrong, I think, with certainly encouraging events around the downtown. That way people aren't focused on that one area.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
I've got a number of issues. One of which I sort of endorsed the one doing the parking. I realize, having talked to one of the restaurant owners, that doesn't help a whole lot.
Which
The
doesn't.
question would be, is opening that during the week, is that worth the trouble for them to add a couple extra tables? I don't have that answer. I think that's something that needs to be responded to.
Wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Engel, you're saying just closing the east side parking?
We've thrown into the mixture, opening the parallel parking lane 24/7 to allow that. I'm not opposed to it at all, but the question is, do the restaurant owners get something from that? It's enough to make it worth their trouble, is the first question I have to ask. I'm in favor of whatever they want to do. I had a question about whether they could react fast enough by this weekend, and I've been told, yes, they can. And I have confidence in the person that told me that. So we've raised the issue of fully closing Washington Street. I'm vehemently opposed to that for a number of reasons at the moment. I think, first of all, what we need to be doing, if you're gonna do it, is something meaningful and something you can evaluate. I think part of the problem last week was we tried to do too much too fast. There were a lot of variables. We had no idea, or when it was planning, no one thought that Harrison Street was gonna be block the intersection of Washington Street, and I think that truly complicated downtown. And from what I understand, that's gonna continue probably through October, so that's something during the week, I think we can't even think about that.
So real quick, when you said you're against closing Washington Street, that's a no. Are you talking about Monday through Friday, or are you saying even on the weekends is a no?
I'm not convinced you wanna close the entire thing. I think that, at least in my opinion, I think there are two decent proposals, and you made the hybrid of leaving the parallel parking open during the week. That sounds good to me if it works for our constituents here, and I don't have an answer, and I don't have a side on it. I think the question of that is, if the restaurants owners want to do that, I think that's gotta be the guiding factor on it. But I mean, there are a number of things that I still feel pretty, that we need to be doing. I think we need to have an MOU plan of action on this thing that we live by. We don't have that. We are loosey-goosey right now, and it makes guys like me very nervous when we don't really have I think we're close to getting one, but I think we need it. And I think we all said, I think we need to constantly evaluate this plan once we start it. And I think very strongly that we need an advisory panel of a couple of restaurant owners and a couple of merchants to meet regularly, no less than every 2 weeks, to identify problems and suggest corrections that we can make. I think we need a comprehensive public information program to get the word out. We need the Star Democrat to do a Friday article to tell everybody what's happening. There'll be some things. And in the end, we need a short primer that people can refer to this thing. I don't feel we're quite there yet. If you can convince me that you can put it together, fine. I think what has to happen is, and I think several of the people who talked to me are in favor of opening, I think we need to make sure that can happen. And we need to make sure we've got barricades that will work. I don't know that. Certainly the ones that we used last week, I think I objected to them. I think they didn't fit in. But as we had a meeting this morning, I know there has to be something somewhere so that that's not a no, you can't do it. I think we need to do due diligence to make the place continue to give it the luster that it has without detracting from it.
And I would argue as far as the barricades go, and all that, can they be better? Probably. Are they safe? They are. Are they meant to be visible to a driver? They are. And can they be spruced up on the inside? I think there's an opportunity there. I don't think the barriers had a chance last week when we stopped everything. I don't think they had the opportunity to, spruce them up, decorate with plants and all that. So I think that's unfortunate. So there was another point, I lost my mind. My train of thought, sorry,
You're asking
not
me
my
to
mind.
remember?
What was it, you also mentioned the barriers and, along the barrier line, I know what it was, my apologies. We have those barriers now, and if we're talking about costs along with Mr. Silverstein's, why switch to something now if we don't know in 2 or 3 months this is a success? Why put the investment into it now if we see it as a success? And there's an opportunity, to extend something long-term, then I think that's when the investment happens. I don't think we put it in now, not knowing necessarily it's going to be
You've
successful.
got two kinds of barriers. You're gonna have one that's north-south on Washington Street, then you're gonna have something that separates that northbound lane from the traffic. I don't know what, I saw the ones they used for the demonstration, the metal ones, and I thought those looked fine, but I'm not an expert on that area. So I think that's something that our public works and the police department need to be looking at. Because there is, let's face it, there's always a chance that someone's gonna go a little postal and try to do something. So I think we need to protect as much as we can. But I still feel, and I'm gonna bring it up again, I feel very strongly that we have this meeting with the merchants to find out what they feel, and then the final plan would be a result of how they feel.
Megan, if I can.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Patel, I can't see you.
Sorry. So a couple of things. One, I agree with Ron and with you. I think those barriers are not the best, but I think that if this did prove to be somewhat successful, that we could phase those out and replace them with something else. But the other thing is, as far as the closure of Washington Street, if we're just talking about the parallel parking spots in front of Doc's, Pub, Scosa's, then we're just talking about outside eating for those 3 restaurants. If we're talking about trying to increase foot traffic downtown to help the other businesses, because when we walked around last week, we talked to businesses on Goldsboro Street and on South Washington Street, Harrison Street, and they wanted to see something that would increase foot traffic downtown. Now, definitely I agree with Al, there can be different things in different places like Thompson Park, but if we're talking about increasing foot traffic on a weekly basis downtown, on a weekend basis, I guess you could say downtown, then I think we need to look at the street closure, again, just on Saturday and Sunday, because Monday through Friday I think would be a mistake, but on Saturday and Sunday to try to improve foot traffic to help out those businesses. Because if we're just talking about the parallel spots, then we're just talking about helping out those 3 restaurants, and that's not really going to be a benefit to those other stores downtown.
Right.
Thanks.
Sorry, Ross, yeah.
Sure. Just because a few things have been brought up, and so I just think it's important for us to comment. We are okay, due to the urgency of this with some of our restaurants, with starting this out with a dining focus. I mean, we are okay with that, and we're okay not doing events in the first week or 2, going through the public assembly process, which we're very familiar with. And I think that Mr. Silverstein brings up a great point. we do have some areas in town that may be more beneficial for those things. Thompson Park, we already have had some really productive conversations with Mr. Hollis about using the courthouse grounds as well, potentially for some things that wouldn't require a street closure. I think that when we started to plan this out, and I'll blame partially on maybe our own naivety for this, we were kind of in a bubble in terms of the pandemic for a little while here on the Midshore. And then for a while it seemed like it was going down pretty steadily in Maryland. And I think that we're seeing now that, of course, social distancing was going to be a concern for us, and we knew it was going to be a slow build back, but we're now seeing it hit home for us pretty quickly the past week or two. And so I do understand the concerns of social distancing, and I think that they have merit to them. And so if we want to focus on a dining-focused situation here for a couple weeks, 3 weeks, as long as we have the ability to continue to look at this and talk to our stakeholders, like Mr. Engel mentioned, and talking to our businesses, we're okay with that. To speak to the parallel space idea, I do agree with Mr. Engel in terms of trying to identify what is the overall effectiveness of it. I think for it to really be effective, we will have to allow restaurants to go beyond their walls. And so, you're talking about allowing the pub to serve all the way up to Doc's area, Doc's allowing to serve all the way up to Scos's area, to make sure that they see benefit to it. And also, we are talking about a 50-foot street, at least here in the beginning with Washington Street. And so we're talking about a street that necessarily you don't need to restrict yourself to the width of the parallel parking for that parklet. For the way that we look at this, is that for one of our bigger concerns, we're certainly going to be traffic through the area. As long as we can maintain two-way traffic in some way, and then we can adequately spread out tables and offer those businesses a way to get back on their feet. In some ways, it's a bit of a win-win. I don't know that there's an ideal situation here. I like Mr. Engel's idea about an advisory panel to look at this. I think that's a great idea, especially building in some business owners and some others into that idea. One thing that we certainly do need, though, I think that it's difficult to evaluate anything without knowing the direct objectives. We do need to know, and we mentioned it in the last meeting, our objective in all of this is to bring business downtown. We're not the health department. We're not the police. We're not engineering. We're not doing traffic studies and the like. Those are all things that do have a place in this process. But I think that we do need to know what is the objective for this going forward, because that is what's really going to guide not only us, but the advisory panel, the businesses next week. I mean, that objective or objectives is going to be really key to make sure that we have something, that to bring to those businesses and the like, beyond just, hey, we want to get, more cash flow into your business, more diners at your tables. What is the objective overall for the town to do a project like this?
We continue to plow the same field in various meetings, and I think until we get the business folks together next week and we find out what they want, find out what their needs are and everything else, find out and then develop goals and objectives. The council can then provide notice to the public and review our deliberations. We can talk about social distancing, how we're going to make sure people social distance. We can create specific goals and objectives in establishing a promenade or not. We can then have better understanding of what we want. And so when we come back, we've got concrete stuff in front of us. And, I appreciate the opportunity today to get together. I appreciated the opportunity yesterday. But we continue to talk through things. So, let's put it in action. Let's get the facilitated meeting going. And then let's take the information out of that meeting. Ross speaks for his membership, and he speaks for a portion of the town. But there are other people who came and spoke to us, and they spoke in a different light. I've got other emails against closing the streets from business people. We all have different constituencies that have come to us. And, I know today we're not going to make any decisions, and that's fine. except maybe to move forward with this meeting with the business owners. And I look forward to that. And, you know, we can't get more than 2 of us at that meeting. I'm willing to stay away from that to make sure,
Well, unless it's publicized, then
well,
I think we're able to.
if you want to do it that way, that's fine. I think the biggest thing is that we've talked through a lot of different stuff. Let's hear from the business people. Let's get them in the room. Let's get this facilitated meeting going, and then let's come back with some concrete things that we can make some determinations on. I think the barriers do not represent our community well. I think when we do things, we should do them the best we can. And we have, we've got a community that, you know, we're very proud of, that's won numbers of awards. And what we want to do is, when we do it, we want to, once again, have people say, I came downtown and this was a great event, this was done well, this looks great, it's representative of the community. And so I think we have the chance to do that.
Yes, and all good points. I do think, though, you know, time is of the essence. I think we need to try something this weekend. I don't think we need to have the full plan in place. I think listening to the business owners is a good idea and getting public comment, but I don't see why we can't try something this weekend. Even if it is, Ross, you said dining only for 1 to 2 weeks. Is that what you?
I mean, we're fine. Again, I think that we were brought to the table in the beginning with the pandemic because of the urgency to get cash flow into our businesses. And so if it has to be dining only for a while, we're okay with that. But for whatever period that is, we will obviously need, if the scheduling is correct with, as it typically is, we're going to need 2 weeks to get the public assembly permits and the like approved at the council meeting, to get the police a chance to look it over and to get the council a chance. So that would be 2 weeks at the minimum. Yeah.
And I think we get ourselves right back at where we were before by moving too quickly, not crossing our T's, not dotting our I's. I don't know, like I say, I want to help everybody we can, but we've got an obligation to do it right. And I'm not in favor of doing anything this weekend.
If possible, I think 2 weeks is a great timeline. Ross, I think for you to get your ducks in a row, but I do not. I think Mr. Silverstein, I might disagree with you on this one, is that I don't see why we can't push to get something open this weekend. I think if we did what Ross recommended, the parallel parking dining for 2 weeks, you're not looking at public assembly permits yet. It's allowing him time to get in there. It's a step forward. We don't have to make a permanent decision. It allows us to start, get some data. We'll get some data along the way for the first 2 weeks, and then we can add that data into this public comment and to what the businesses say next week, potentially next week at this meeting. You know, I think Mr. Silverstein, you make some good points, but I don't see why we are doing that, why we can't also do something starting this weekend to give people a chance.
You called this as a public meeting, yet you're not letting anybody but Ross.
No,
Now, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't heard the opening up for any other comments or anything like that.
We have engineering. I'd encourage engineering. I'm just making a proposal. I'm just saying that's my opinion.
And I'm saying that we should have, if we're going to do these kind of things, we should have had full testimony from anybody who wanted to testify, which we've done before. I'm just not ready to vote on that particular issue at this time, but I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Rick, we never asked. Sorry, I wasn't sure. I didn't mean to overlook you.
That's all right. So just to give you an update on some of the things that I've been working on over the last couple of days, I did reach out to a traffic consultant. We've worked with a couple different traffic consultants. I reached out, in this case, I reached out to a firm that we've done some work with before. It's RK&K. They're a large engineering firm in Baltimore. And they came down and met with me yesterday. We looked at the downtown area, and I was just trying to brainstorm with them, trying to see if they had some experiences in other parts of the state or other states, for that matter. Just if they could provide some thoughts for us to consider. And so they did. They spent a good part of the morning down here yesterday, What they had recommended was to if they wanted us to do, if we wanted them to do a traffic study, they would need 8 to 12 weeks to do that study. And so that's a long time. That's longer than I thought, to be perfectly honest. I was hoping it would be quick. I knew that it might be longer. I didn't expect it to be that long, to be honest. And the price was larger than I thought. Their estimate was between $35,000 and $40,000 to do the traffic counts, and that would involve equipment out there to count the cars that are coming through, to figure out what's happening now, and then come up with a plan based on some of the different options that I thought were going to be discussed today. And then they would evaluate those options and see how that would affect traffic. That seemed like more time and more money than what I was hoping that they would tell me. I also spoke today to Greg Slater he's the Secretary of Transportation at the Maryland Department of Transportation. And he said that he's been working with towns like ours to try to accomplish what's on the table here. And so he said that his staff of engineers at the state, if we would send them a plan, a drawing of what we're trying to do, they would evaluate that drawing and get back to us in a relative, he wouldn't commit to a time, but he said the more detail the better that we could provide him. He would then provide feedback from his team of traffic engineers at the state level. And they've done this for other towns. Bel Air, I believe, was one of the towns that he said that he's worked with. And he said even though Washington Street is not a state highway, all of our streets are a network, and they interact with other state highways in and around town. So he would, even though that piece of road is not a state highway, he would like to help us out. So if we get some feedback, one of my hopes is that today we'll get some ideas on the table that I might be able to put on a drawing and send to him and get some feedback from his group. And he said that in the towns that he's worked with, they haven't done the full-blown traffic studies that RK&K gave me their proposal for. That they haven't done that for this type of effort to try to bring some of the restaurants out into the streets and things like that. They've assisted at the state level. As far as the barricades go, right now we have 10 barricades, and those are I like the barricades, but I know there's been a lot of comment about that they're unsightly. But what we do like about them is that they're solid, and so they're plastic, they're filled with water. I know they're not very attractive, but they do grab your attention. We can adjust accordingly, but we do want to make sure that they're visible. But one of the things I just want to point out is we currently have 10 of them, and we rented 10 of them because to accommodate the plan that we implemented and then took down. So we still have those 10. We reached out. We can get 4 more of them by tomorrow. We can get 16 more by the weekend. That adds up to 30. If we were to, by a quick calculation, if we were to do the length of the street that we're talking about, we would need 50. So we would only have 30 out of 50 that we need. So we wouldn't have enough barriers. And the way that they work is they connect to each other, so that if you hit one barrier, they move together. So by themselves, you hit them, they'll fall down. Working together, the whole system has to move together. So we really need them to be connected. So we only have 30 out of the 50 that we would need. Now you can use chains and steel rods and things like that to connect them. I haven't had the time to figure out how that could all work. But one of the things, again, what I was hoping is that today, as I hear the conversation, that I can then go get some more information for you to figure out how we could make some of these ideas happen from an engineering perspective.
Can I ask you a quick question then about the total, just so I'm clear? Is that 50 that are end-to-end, or is that 50 with the bar?
That's 50 end-to-end. So we could, if we added bars in there, we could use less. That's true.
Because you said they have to be connected. So if they're end-to-end, they're still connected.
Right, so the way that they're set up is there's a part, the way that they're formed is there's a cylinder and then an opening, and you slide them on top of each other and they fit into each other almost like a Lego. And so they, if they're not connected, you have to connect them with a chain or a bar or something. They have to be connected some way.
Okay,
But they're connected end to end.
okay. So potentially, if you had 30 and we had enough bars by the weekend, you could connect them by bars.
Right.
Okay.
We still have to figure out how to connect them without poking a hole in them and making all the water run out. But I'm sorry, Don?
No, sorry, Rick. Is that the entire length of Washington Street, or is that just from the pub to the to Scotia's?
I believe that's from Federal Street to Dover Street. Is it?
And I think we talked about just in front of the restaurants.
Oh, that's just the
Pretty
restaurant.
much.
Okay.
And leave up spaces open.
Okay.
So that might decrease the number.
That would decrease the
Slightly.
number significantly.
Okay.
Yeah.
250 feet is the distance from
Scotia to the pub.
Scotia to the pub. So that's two. So we would need 50 to get from Scotia to the pub.
Oh, just 50 for there?
Yeah. So it's
Okay.
so to go 250 feet, we would need 50 barricades.
Okay.
So we would need more than that to go the entire length.
Okay.
We've been calculating quickly here this afternoon,
Well, I
this morning.
appreciate
So,
I thought you were talking 50 for the whole street. So.
yes, no, it would be more than that. And then they said, talking to Suburban Propane is who's providing these, and they said they need a few more days to determine how many more are available and that when they may be delivered. Because they're doing similar deliveries to other towns like ours and other events like ours. So there aren't any readily available, but I think some of them are coming back, and so they're trying to get their arms around what's available to rent to us.
Okay.
One other thing I just would like to add since I'm standing up here, some of the discussion about the weekend closures. There's certainly benefits to it. One of the concerns that I have from an engineering perspective is I did go out last Friday and look at the number of people that were out at the restaurants, which was good to see, but it made me think from my seat how we would physically, and I think it was discussed earlier, is how would we move all of the when the courthouse closes at the end of the day on Friday, how do we move all those vehicles out of the space and then put the barriers in place, and then the restaurants get the tables out into the streets? Can we do that quick enough? Because it's going to take several hours for us to set up the way, it took us several hours to set up what we did last week. So when could we start? When would the courthouse close? Let's say it closed at 3 o'clock. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but when is it, Greg? When Captain, right?
It could be, and if there's a jury trial, it could be 4 or 5.
So if it's 4 or 5 o'clock, the problem is by the time that's done and those cars move, and if they're not all out, we're going to need help. Are we going to tow them? I mean, these are things that we should think about, right? So how are we going to move these vehicles out of the space? Once we get the vehicles out of space, then it's going to take a couple hours to set up our system, and then the restaurants have to get their tables into the street. So it's going to take some time to set up. One thing that I would recommend considering is, does it make more sense to set it up Saturday morning? I know Friday night is a big chunk of what would be beneficial from the restaurant standpoint, but from a setup standpoint, it would certainly be. It certainly simplifies things if we could do it Saturday morning, and it could be a Saturday event, Saturday-Sunday event, if a weekend closure is something that we land at.
Okay.
That's all I have, unless you have any questions.
I was just gonna say, I know that I forgot Rick, but I also forgot you, Mayor.
I just sitting over getting the itch to say something. For the last couple of weeks, we've heard several people comment about the fact we didn't do our due diligence before getting into this process. We didn't have a traffic study. Rick has come up with an idea now and a proposal from RK&K that would be 10 to 12 weeks. Well, that's okay, but then this year is over with. We're in the next year. Is that what we want to do? The second one was the fact that we didn't have a planner to help us with the process. And lo and behold, we find that Andrew only lived a couple of blocks down the street and was certainly willing to help us with the process and the project. We've talked about maybe being too specific and trying to appeal to a certain group of people, but we don't have a goal yet of what we expect to do and where we expect to go with that process. We need to, and if I'm getting off base, Andrew, please let me know. But we had also talked about making Easton a destination that would fit everyone's needs, or the majority of the people. Traffic barriers, no offense, but those things we've got now are hideous, and to think we're going to have 3 times that many more uptown is not very, very appealing. Parking, we block off entire streets downtown now for street concerts, and these appeal to people my age and older, commonly referred to as the old group. But these people can walk in and bring their lawn chairs with them, find a place to sit, find a place to park, so it works out. I talked about the definite goal, and everybody is kind of looking for specific results, but we're not going to appeal to everybody. Everybody's not going to get 100%. But basically, my comments are don't close the streets, and we've heard that from several people. I'm not in favor of another commission that's going to report on activities, but I would say a small committee that did a critique session, we've talked about that before, on Mondays that would say, okay, this didn't work well on Friday and Saturday, this is what we need to try next week. Something like that might be worthwhile doing. We need to get a stronger liaison between the town and EBA, EEDC, and so forth, so we'll be working on that Friday morning about setting that one up. But I just think that we're now into the 3rd week of talking about this, and we're already talking about setting the meeting up next week. That may be 2 weeks after that. You're into August, rapidly going to Labor Day, so before you know it, the summer's going to be over, and we might as well start talking about next year, because we'll be too late into the process to get something done. If we just need a couple of extra tables on the street just to see how it would work out, why can't we go ahead and do that this week? We've already been told that some of the restaurants have ordered the extra furniture, they've ordered extra food and so forth. At least give them a shot just to see if it will bring more people into the downtown. Friday night, you had a benefit at Thompson Park for the hopeful signs. There must have been well over 100 people there. They did it without any cops being around to help with traffic. They did it without people mingling in the streets, and they were able to do the process very well, and it went off very well. I think we're tending to over-engineer this thing, and we can get something going to help them out, help out the restaurants, help out the shops, get the people downtown, let them mingle around, let them walk, and let's get something going. Let's don't talk about it for another month.
Well, Mayor, if you're talking about being able to put more tables out on the sidewalks and spread it down the street, I agree with you 100%.
And that doesn't cost us anything, doesn't take any time.
Yeah, we don't need
Stuff's
traffic studies, we don't need barriers, we don't need anything else. I'm 100% in favor of that.
100% in favor of closing that parallel parking.
No, not even closing the parallel, just let them put more tables on the street, let them move down the street. You've got some of the stores closed, let them get some tables out there, let's see what it looks like. Let's see if we can draw some more people. That's a good experiment, without having to do all these other things.
I agree. Why don't we then try closing that east side parking in front
Well,
of the
and what that's not what I'm saying.
I know, but I'm just making
No, I appreciate
the
that.
next step.
I don't want to see us start with the barriers and everything else. And I want to see us put some more tables out there, as the mayor talked about, and let people see if that helps draw more people to them. And we can evaluate it very quickly. They're going to tell you if the cash register rings. They'll know right away.
So the mayor's executive orders that you all have blessed have expanded some of the sidewalk cafe permit provisions that allow the tables to be more than just the width of the business. So we've already done, they're already permitted to do some of what you're talking about, and some expanded tables there. they have to get consent from the property owner that they would be infringing upon, but,
Adjacent to them.
yeah.
Sharon, do you mind if I ask? Do we have the space on the Washington Street sidewalk to be ADA compliant and allow them to go too deep?
I don't know how wide.
A lot of people are
They
saying
have
no,
to main-
so.
They still have to maintain, we did not modify the 6 foot width, I
Right.
think it is, isn't it, that the sidewalk cafe permit requires.
So they still need 6 feet of
I think
walking.
it's 6.
I would think from ADA, you want at least 5 to move a wheelchair through the space.
So whatever, 5 or 6, whatever that is.
Well, Mayor, I agree with a lot of what you said, that I think we do need to get going on something. I know we're not gonna have a plan in place for this weekend, but I don't see why we can't.
Put a couple tables out.
I don't see why we can't actually close that parallel parking for the weekend and give it a try. Give 'em, when you add the ADA space in there, just give them a little extra space. I mean, Mr. Engel or Mr. Abatello, you guys, we haven't heard from you in a little bit.
Well, I'm in favor of what we can do to help the restaurants if we can. I've been wrestling with the street crossing closings, and I've not been comfortable with it. There's a minimum I think we need to consider what the mayor's proposed. I'm not opposed to closing some of the parking, parallel parking. I don't think we need to close the whole thing. But I want to give everybody a chance. The other thing is that I worry about when we're all talking about those we're helping. I think we also need to be paying attention if we're going to have negative impact somewhere. And I think that's a very serious thing, and I know there are people that are fearful of that. So I think that whatever evaluation we have to do that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear both sides. I think the expanding of the sidewalk, if it works, I mean, I haven't looked at it, so it was just.
It may work, it doesn't cost us anything to try it, if we have to go to Plan 2, whatever that may be. But at least we gotta get something going.
But it
If
sounds,
everybody is in agreement that the restaurants could use a hand, then we need to get something going.
I agree, but it sounds like according to your orders, they've already been allowed that extra space in the street, so maybe we need to allow just a little extra more into the parking as a trial, just to start with.
If not, we'll make another order before I leave here this afternoon.
So if we were to suggest closing the parallel parking spots, we would need to have public comment, correct?
We're taking public comment on the proposals, I think, that are up here. I believe that closing the parking is just a temporary thing. That's not the plan, that's not the final plan. It doesn't have the businesses, there's no plan from Ross for entertainment. It's just a short term, something to do for the next couple weeks while these steps of getting comment and occur. So I don't necessarily think they're linked. I mean, I think the first one is a step forward, but I think we're working towards a final plan.
I would say the mayor has an order. The order allows them to be able to spread out tables and do some other things. If we start making other changes and alterations in streets and everything else, then it's appropriate to have public comment before you ask us to vote on that. I want to be as transparent as possible. I know we're on Facebook, I know we're on TV, but this is an open meeting. I don't see where we're taking testimony. My understanding was we weren't, and so we have an option to take a look at. Let's get with the restaurants and let's talk with them tomorrow or the next day, have them plan it out and see what the additional sidewalk tables and chairs look like, and see how that's gonna work. But I'm not ready to make the other decisions. I felt I got stampeded into the last one. I'm not getting stampeded into this one.
Well, I think the sidewalk for the first week, with the idea that if it works without stuff, that we can reconsider expanding it to the parking spaces. I think it's important to make some, instead of motion, I think we need to make some movement. And we've had a lot of motion lately. So,
But is the, following the mayor's current plan movement? Because that's what you're saying right now, unless I think we expand into that parking space for this weekend, we're not moving forward, we're just,
I don't know how much room there is for expansion. I have a feeling that most of the restaurants are staying within their footprint. And they're public sidewalks, right? Can they expand without, how can they expand?
They can't block the sidewalk, but as far as I know, and Sharon can correct me, they could go north and south on that sidewalk.
That's how we added it so far. If you want us to look and see if there is a minimum distance required to maintain, if that can be reduced at all and allow even more, we can look at that.
Well,
But it does allow the expansion to the side. While maintaining.
because I think that's important. If you add 2 tables and you maybe can add up to 6, well, I think that makes a difference.
The way it reads is you just have to have consent from that property owner that you're kind of, moving on to. Yeah, putting tables in front of. Other than that, there's nothing else that prevents them from doing that now.
Sharon, is that a 24/7 then? So those businesses can be doing that all the time now, it's not just
Just like their normal sidewalk cafe outdoor dining.
Mr. Abatello, do you have any?
Yeah. Ross, if you want to say something real quick, and then I'll speak if you want. I don't look like you were going to say something.
I mean, technically, you're a lot more important in this meeting, if you want to.
I'm in Massachusetts, yeah.
I just wanted to add in, since it seems like there's not going to be any type of vote today, which I understand, we got the idea for those barriers, or I should say, Rick got the idea for those barriers from Rehoboth Beach. They use those same ones down there. Bethesda also uses those same barriers. Rehoboth uses them, though, in a way which I think is interesting. So they allow their sidewalks to go fully deep with tables. So as opposed to keeping against the wall like we do here and having space to go around them, they allow their sidewalks to fill about 3 or 4 deep, depending on the size of them, with tables right in front of the restaurant. And then they use those barriers just to block the 1 or 2 spaces that are right next to the restaurant for pedestrian walking. And so they don't use the barriers for where the tables are going to be. They let the tables go out 3 deep, 4 deep, and then they just use them because they just need to take about a space or 2 for pedestrians to get around those tables safely and socially distanced. And so that's also just something to consider, I think, that we can actually fit probably more tables on the sidewalk with distancing and go 2 deep or 3 deep, as long as we allow for pedestrians to get around them safely and we wouldn't have to take up the whole thing.
All right, thanks, Ross. So we've taken public comment on this for the last week. We've gotten emails, phone calls, we've gone to businesses, we've had letters written to us, we've had letters written to members of the town. So I think with the thing I'm going to propose right now, I would say that we've taken enough public comment on it, and I would propose that we safely secure the parallel parking on East Washington Street so that the restaurants on Washington Street could move their tables out and get a little bit more room and socially distance safely, and then do that for this weekend.
I would support that. I think that is, again, I'll restate, I think it allows us to start something rather than, we need some action forward. It's a medium, it's a step forward. It allows time for planning. Ross needs time to get his work done. We need time to hear from the businesses. I think it's a great opportunity to close it down. If you have to do it for the weekend, fine, just do it for the weekend and allow them, we have to start something. It's not what's it's gonna look like in 4, 5, 6 weeks, if we're still doing this in 4, 5, 6 weeks. It is a start, it's an opportunity, we have to start somewhere and allow time then for the process. But unless we start, like the mayor said, we are gonna drag this out to September or October, and why are we all here now? So, I would support Mr. Abatello's plan to open the parallel parking on East Washington Street for the weekend and allow this process to continue.
So, you want to make an official motion, Megan?
Yes.
So I move that the town close the parallel parking Friday to allow for Friday evening, Saturday and Sunday, and then to reevaluate how that weekend went at Monday night's meeting. And also, again, that will allow for us to continue to collect other public comments.
And I would second that. And I'd appreciate, I know it's not all in favor, I would appreciate a roll call so we are all clear. Let's move forward, let's get this planning process in place. Let's give it a try. Let's hear from the stakeholders. Please, if you're listening to this meeting, let us know. Mayor.
One other thing. Please don't put another commission in place. Let Ross and Tracy and myself and Natalie, we'll get together every Monday and give you a report back on how the preceding weekend went.
Thank you. Any other staff or councilmen have questions or concerns? I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Thank you.